The ground trembled as the massive alien ship descended from the sky, its dark, imposing shape silhouetted against the backdrop of a fading sun. The air was thick with anticipation, and every soul within 100 miles seemed to hold their breath as the craft hovered above the Earth's surface. No one knew what was coming, but the sheer power of the ship was enough to send a chill through the core of every observer. In a small town on the outskirts of the city, Jack Pierce watched the sky, his eyes narrowed in disbelief. He had never seen anything like this before. As a simple man who had spent his entire life serving coffee at a small diner, he had always been more concerned with the ebb and flow of daily life than anything beyond his quiet existence. But today, that existence was threatened in a way he couldn't yet understand. He looked to his left, where the faint hum of the diner's neon sign flickered in the twilight. A sound so mundane now felt out of place in the face of the unknown. Jack wasn't the only one who noticed the ship's descent. People in the streets stopped in their tracks, staring at the sky with a mixture of awe and terror. A man shouted to his neighbor, "It's them! It's really happening!" His words were drowned out by the growing hum of the ship's engines, which seemed to vibrate the very air around them. Jack felt the hairs on his neck stand up. His thoughts raced. What was happening? What were these creatures capable of? As the ship landed with a soft thud on the outskirts of the town, a strange sense of unease filled the air. In a moment that felt both frozen in time and rushed all at once, the hatch of the ship began to open. A bright light poured from the interior, and then, emerging from the glow, came figures, tall, imposing, and unlike anything Jack had ever seen. Their skin was a shade of silver that seemed to shimmer in the fading light, and their eyes glowed an unnatural red, piercing the shadows around them. The aliens, who had been so silent in their descent, now moved with purpose, their every step deliberate and terrifying. They had arrived, but for what purpose? Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he instinctively took a step back, a tinge of fear rising in his throat. He wasn't the only one retreating. People from the nearby houses were running, scattering like leaves in the wind, unsure whether to flee or confront the unknown. But it wasn't the ship or the aliens themselves that sent the greatest shock through the crowd. It was the way the creatures moved. They didn't just walk, they glided, their feet barely touching the ground, leaving a faint trail of red mist in their wake. The air around them seemed to pulse with energy, bending the very laws of physics. They were not just visitors, they were something more, something far beyond anything humanity could fathom. A strange hum resonated in the air, one that seemed to reverberate deep inside Jack's chest, making his heart beat faster and his muscles tighten. As the first of the aliens approached a group of onlookers, the leader raised a hand, and the group instantly fell silent, as if obeying an unspoken command. Jack's gaze followed the alien leader, who appeared taller than the others, with sleek armor that shimmered like liquid mercury. This was the one in charge. The alien's presence was magnetic, commanding, demanding attention. "People of Earth," the leader's voice resonated through the air, carrying an authority that shook Jack to his very core. It was deep, mechanical, yet laced with a strange, almost melodic cadence. "We are the executioners. You stand in the presence of those who administer justice across the universe. You are here chosen because your time has come." The words hung in the air like a death sentence, and Jack's mind raced. Executioners? What did that mean? His heart pounded louder as his thoughts scrambled for answers. Was this an invasion? A conquest? A form of retribution? The alien's words didn't make sense, but the gravity of the moment, the intensity of the gaze that fell upon every person present, made the situation unmistakably clear. This was no ordinary visit. A murmur rippled through the crowd, a wave of nervous chatter that filled the air. The atmosphere shifted from confusion to terror, as if the realization of what was happening had finally sunk in. Jack's mind struggled to process the alien leader's words. What did he mean by justice? Why had they come to Earth? The alien leader spoke again, but this time, it wasn't to the crowd. Instead, his gaze locked onto Jack, and for a brief, terrifying moment, Jack felt as though the creature was looking straight into his soul. There was no malice, no hatred in the alien's eyes, only cold, unfeeling logic. It was as if Jack, in all his ordinariness, had become a part of something much larger, something beyond his understanding. "You," the leader said, his voice booming across the clearing. "You are the one who will answer the call." Jack froze, his heart stopping for a split second. He couldn't move. He couldn't speak. His breath caught in his throat. Why him? What did they want from him? The alien turned its attention back to the rest of the crowd, as if Jack's moment of shock had never happened. "We are here to execute a judgment, one that will affect your entire world. We will not explain ourselves further. You will learn soon enough." Fear spread like wildfire through the crowd. Some people began to shout, others fell to their knees in panic, while some stood motionless, paralyzed by the unknown. Jack couldn't tear his eyes away from the alien leader, whose words echoed in his mind. "You are the one who will answer the call." What did that mean? Why had he been singled out? As the aliens moved further into the town, Jack's body acted on its own accord. Without fully thinking, he turned and began running, his feet carrying him to the safety of the nearby woods. He couldn't stand to be in the open, to be exposed to whatever plan these visitors from beyond had in store for Earth. But as he reached the edge of the town, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that, no matter how far he ran, he was already caught in a web far larger than anything he could ever escape. The executioners had arrived. And Jack was at the center of it all. The night was thick with the sense of impending doom. The once peaceful town now stood under the watchful eyes of the alien executioners, who had taken their positions, encircling every street and every building. Their towering figures stood like silent sentinels, casting long shadows on the ground. In the distance, Jack could hear the faint sound of voices rising in panic, but it was drowned out by the mechanical hum of the aliens' presence. They had set up a perimeter around the town, leaving no place to hide, no place to run. Jack had retreated to the woods, his heart still racing from the moment the alien leader had singled him out. He could barely comprehend what was happening, let alone understand why he had been chosen. For a moment, he allowed himself to rest against the trunk of a large tree, taking deep breaths, trying to regain some semblance of control over his racing mind. But no matter how much he tried to clear his thoughts, one question echoed over and over again: what do they want from me? The woods were quiet, almost unnervingly so. Even the wind had ceased its usual rustling through the branches, as if nature itself held its breath in fear. Jack stood up, his legs unsteady, and began to make his way deeper into the trees. The soft crunch of leaves beneath his boots was the only sound that accompanied him, but it felt like a betrayal, a noise that would give away his presence at any moment. As he moved, he kept an eye on the sky, watching the ship still hovering in the distance, its lights cutting through the darkness like a beacon. Jack stumbled upon a small clearing, where the moonlight filtered through the treetops, casting an ethereal glow on the ground. He paused, looking around nervously. The night seemed to close in on him as the realization of the situation began to settle in. These aliens weren't just visitors, they were here for a reason. But what was that reason? And why had he, of all people, been chosen? A rustling sound broke through his thoughts, snapping him out of his daze. His heart skipped a beat, and instinctively, he crouched low behind a bush, his breathing shallow. The noise grew louder, and Jack's eyes widened as a figure emerged from the shadows. At first, he thought it was one of the aliens, but as the figure came into view, he recognized it. It was a woman, a local reporter, Sarah Daniels, someone he had seen a few times in the diner. Sarah looked just as disoriented as Jack felt, her face pale, her clothes torn from what looked like a hasty escape. She moved cautiously, her eyes darting around as if expecting something to pounce from the shadows. When she caught sight of Jack, she froze for a moment before rushing towards him. "You're here too?" she whispered, her voice filled with a mix of disbelief and fear. I saw them take people. They're everywhere. What do they want?" Jack could only shake his head, still too overwhelmed to speak. He wasn't alone in this, but it didn't bring him any comfort. Sarah's presence didn't answer his questions, it only deepened the mystery. "They've taken people?" he managed to say, his voice hoarse. What do they do with them? I don't know, she replied, her eyes darting back to the direction of the town. But I saw them, those aliens, they didn't hesitate. They executed someone. Right in front of us. Jack felt the blood drain from his face. Executed someone? The word echoed in his mind, sending a wave of nausea through him. The executioners were not just here to observe, they were here to judge, to pass sentence. We need to get out of here, Sarah said urgently, grabbing Jack's arm. We can't stay in these woods. They'll come for us next. But Jack's mind was already spinning with thoughts. How could we escape them? What can we possibly do? The woods, the town, none of it felt safe. The aliens had control over everything. They were not just invaders. They were executioners, and the people of Earth were nothing more than criminals in their eyes. But Jack wasn't ready to give up just yet. His mind began to churn, trying to think of a way out. They couldn't just run blindly, hoping to escape the fate that awaited them. There had to be something, some way to fight back. He thought of the diner, of the people he had known for years. Would they be spared? Would they be among the ones executed? And what did the executioners want with him? Suddenly, a thought hit Jack, and he glanced at Sarah. There's a chance, he said, his voice filled with a sudden, desperate hope. A chance that we can turn this around. I've been thinking, if we can make them see that we aren't just helpless, that we're capable of resisting, we might be able to turn the tide. Sarah looked skeptical, her brow furrowed. How do you propose we do that? These aliens are not like anything we've ever faced before. They're not going to listen to reason. Maybe they won't, Jack admitted. But we can make them understand that Earth won't just bow down. We have something they don't expect, a kind of spirit they can't control. We can show them that we're more than just animals to be judged. We can fight back. Sarah's eyes narrowed as she processed Jack's words. He could see her hesitation, but there was something else there, too, something stirring beneath the surface. Maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to believe in the possibility of resistance, too. We need to act fast, Jack continued, his mind racing. We can't just sit here and wait for them to come for us. We need to find a way to make them see us differently. But the moment Sarah opened her mouth to speak, a shrill, piercing sound filled the air. It was unmistakable, an alarm. The executioners had discovered their presence. The chase was on. Jack and Sarah didn't wait for a second longer. They bolted into the woods, pushing through the dense underbrush as the sound of footsteps grew louder behind them. Their only hope was to stay ahead of the aliens, but they knew that time was running out. The executioners had found their targets, and they weren't going to stop until they were caught. But Jack was ready now. No longer just running from the unknown, he was determined to face it head-on. The deep, echoing hum of the executioner's ship filled the air, reverberating through the woods, setting Jack's teeth on edge. His heart thudded in his chest as he and Sarah sprinted through the trees, the underbrush tearing at their clothes, the sounds of pursuit closing in around them. They had been running for what felt like hours, but in truth, it had only been minutes since the alarm had sounded. The executioners were faster, more relentless, and their technology far beyond anything Earth had ever seen. Jack could hear the soft whir of their drones overhead, scanning for any sign of life, hunting them down like prey. Sarah, gasping for breath, stumbled slightly but quickly caught herself. They're getting closer, she panted, her face drawn with fear. We can't outrun them forever. Jack's mind raced, trying to think of something, anything that could turn the situation around. His pulse was pounding, his thoughts fragmented, but one idea began to form. We don't need to outrun them. We need to make them think we're not running anymore. We need to stand our ground. What? Sarah's voice was incredulous. Are you out of your mind? There's no way we can take on those things. But Jack had already made up his mind. He wasn't just going to be a victim. There had to be a way to fight back, to show these invaders that Earth had something they hadn't anticipated, something they couldn't control. He had seen their power, their cold, calculating efficiency. But he had also seen their arrogance, their belief that they were above all else. It was that arrogance that could be their downfall. "We have to get to the town," Jack said, determination hardening his voice. "We need to use the environment. The woods, the buildings, anything we can get our hands on. If we're going to survive, we have to take away their advantage, make them think we're unpredictable." Sarah's eyes narrowed, skepticism flickering in them. But there was something else there, too. Something that spoke of the survival instinct. She didn't want to run anymore. "All right," she said, her voice steady now. "We head for the diner. I know a back route." Jack nodded, and the two of them changed course, veering off the main path and into a dense thicket. Their steps grew quieter, the trees thickening around them, until they were moving in near silence. The sound of their pursuers faded slightly, but Jack knew it wouldn't last long. The aliens would be on them soon. As they neared the town, Jack's mind raced ahead. They needed to be smart, to use the environment to their advantage. They couldn't face the aliens head-on, not with their advanced weaponry and superior physical abilities. But if they could create an opening, find a weak point in the executioner's plan, they might stand a chance. The diner came into view, the neon lights flickering in the distance. Jack could see the familiar sign, the small structure that had been his workplace for years. But now it seemed insignificant against the vast, overpowering threat looming over them. The thought of using the diner as a staging ground for their fight seemed almost absurd, but there was something in its simplicity that Jack clung to. He knew this place. He knew every inch of it. It was the one thing he could control in this chaotic nightmare. Sarah, already leading the way, reached the back door of the diner and shoved it open. The smell of stale coffee and grease hit Jack immediately, a strange comfort in the midst of everything. But there was no time to waste. They had to move fast. Inside, Jack and Sarah worked quickly, their hands shaking as they set up makeshift barricades with tables and chairs. Jack's mind raced through the plan. They couldn't fight the aliens with firepower, but they could fight with unpredictability, with terrain, with the knowledge that the executioners wouldn't expect a full-fledged resistance from the people of Earth. "We need to set traps," Jack said, his voice low but determined. "If they think we're just hiding, they'll move in and finish us off. But if we make them think we're more dangerous than we really are, they'll hesitate," Sarah finished, her eyes lighting up with the spark of understanding. "Okay, I can work with that." For the next few minutes they moved with purpose, using every object they could find, stools, coffee machines, anything that could be used to disrupt the aliens' movement. Jack wasn't sure if their crude weapons would even slow the aliens down, but he had to hope it would be enough. They had no choice. The sound of heavy footsteps broke through the silence, and Jack's heart clenched. The executioners were here. Through the diner's small windows, Jack caught sight of the alien soldiers moving in, their tall, looming figures barely visible in the dim light. They were close, too close. Jack's pulse quickened. There was no turning back now. "We're going to need a distraction," Jack muttered, turning to Sarah. "Can you get to the kitchen? I need you to trigger the gas lines. It's a long shot, but if we can make them think we're trying to blow the whole place up, it might give us the edge." Sarah's eyes widened for a moment before she nodded. "I can do that. But we need to time it right." Jack barely had time to reply before the door to the diner slammed open. Two of the executioners stepped inside, their eyes scanning the room with unnerving precision. Jack held his breath, his hand hovering over the makeshift weapon he had crafted, a heavy frying pan that could at least buy him a few moments. The aliens took a few slow steps forward, their movements deliberate, unfazed by the obvious signs of resistance. They had seen it all before, no doubt. But what they hadn't seen was Jack's plan in motion. At the exact moment one of the aliens advanced toward him, Jack slammed the frying pan against a metal chair, creating a loud, distracting noise. The alien froze, its glowing eyes flashing toward him, but before it could react, Sarah triggered the gas lines in the kitchen. A loud hiss filled the room, followed by a deafening boom. The explosion rocked the diner, sending the alien soldiers stumbling back. Jack and Sarah didn't hesitate. They rushed forward, using the confusion to their advantage, launching a series of attacks using whatever they could find. The executioners, momentarily disoriented, struggled to regain control. For the first time since the aliens had arrived, Jack felt a flicker of hope. They weren't just running anymore. They were fighting. And as the smoke cleared, he realized one thing above all else. They weren't going to let Earth go down without a fight. The thick smoke from the explosion hung in the air, swirling around the diner's interior like a fog of uncertainty. The echoes of the blast were still ringing in Jack's ears as he and Sarah took cover behind an overturned table. The executioners, momentarily stunned by the explosion, were regaining their composure, their glowing eyes scanning the room with alarming precision. Jack's pulse raced, his heart hammering against his chest as the reality of the situation set in. They were not just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for the future of Earth. For a moment, everything seemed to slow down. Jack's mind cleared, and the panic that had been building since the aliens first landed gave way to something else: focus. His eyes darted around the room, taking in everything. The overturned tables, the scattered chairs, the smoldering remains of the blast. Every corner of the diner could be used. They had turned their world of daily routines into a battlefield. And now it was time to make it count. "Sarah," Jack whispered, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We can't let them take us alive. We need to finish this now." Sarah, her face smudged with dirt and ash, nodded. There was no time to second guess. The alien soldiers were closing in. They had to act fast. Through the haze, Jack spotted a movement. One of the executioners, a towering figure with sharp, angular features, stepped forward, its glowing eyes fixed on him. It raised its hand, and Jack's blood ran cold. But then, a thought struck him, something they hadn't anticipated. Something they didn't expect from the people they had considered nothing more than prey. With a swift motion, Jack grabbed a metal tray, launching it toward the alien. The executioner moved to block it, but Jack had already anticipated that. The tray collided with a set of hanging pots and pans, sending them clattering to the ground in a loud, metallic crash. The alien momentarily turned its head, distracted, and Jack seized the opportunity. He grabbed a nearby fire extinguisher and hurled it straight at the alien's face. The blast of foam hit the creature square in the eyes, blinding it temporarily. It shrieked, stumbling back, its arms flailing. Jack didn't wait for it to recover. He rushed forward, kicking over another table to gain momentum, and swung a nearby chair at the alien's chest. The force of the impact sent the creature crashing into the wall, its body crumpling to the ground. For a brief moment, Jack thought they had actually done it. But then the second executioner appeared, its glowing eyes narrowing in a deadly gaze. The alien raised its weapon, a long, sleek blade that seemed to hum with energy. The air crackled with electricity as the alien advanced, its eyes fixed on Jack. "We need a plan," Sarah said, her voice tight with tension. She was out of breath, but she had been by his side through every step of this battle. "What now?" Jack's mind raced. He looked at the alien, then back at Sarah. There was a flicker of realization in his eyes. "We can't fight them head-on. But we don't have to. We've got one shot at this." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "We need to use the ship," Jack said, his voice steady. "It's still out there, hovering over the town. If we can get to it, we might be able to use their own technology against them. We just need to get close enough." The sound of footsteps approaching snapped them both out of their conversation. The second executioner was coming for them. They couldn't waste any more time. Jack grabbed Sarah's hand, pulling her toward the back door of the diner. They dashed out into the night, running toward the outskirts of the town. The executioners, now aware of their escape, gave chase, but Jack didn't look back. His focus was on the massive alien ship looming above them. The ship's engines hummed, a constant reminder of the power it held. Jack had no idea how they could disable it, but he knew that if they had any hope of winning, it had to be now. As they neared the ship, they ducked into a nearby alley, hiding from the view of the aliens. Jack's heart raced, but there was no turning back now. "We need to get inside," he said. I don't care how. We just need to get in. Sarah nodded. She was breathing heavily, but there was a determined look in her eyes now. She had seen the same thing Jack had. The ship was their only hope. If they could infiltrate it, they could find a way to take down the executioners and send a message to the rest of Earth. As they crept closer to the ship, they spotted a hatch on the side. It was guarded by a single alien, but Jack wasn't about to let that stop them. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small device he had swiped from the diner's kitchen. It wasn't much, but it might just be enough. He tossed the device into the alleyway, and it detonated with a loud bang, creating a blinding flash of light. The alien guarding the hatch froze, disoriented by the explosion. Jack and Sarah didn't waste a second. They sprinted forward, diving into the hatch as it began to close. Inside, the ship was like nothing Jack had ever seen. The walls were lined with sleek metal panels, pulsating with light, and strange symbols that seemed to shift and change as they moved. But there was no time to explore. Jack could hear the alien soldiers approaching, their footsteps echoing down the corridor. They found their way to the central control room, a vast space filled with holographic displays and complex machinery. Jack's eyes locked onto a large control panel in the center of the room, and without hesitation, he ran toward it. He had no idea how it worked, but instinct told him that if they could disable it, they might be able to stop the executioners in their tracks. Sarah followed close behind, her hands shaking as she helped Jack try to make sense of the controls. The lights in the room flickered, and the hum of the ship seemed to grow louder as the aliens outside pressed forward. "We have to act fast," Sarah said. "If they catch us—" "I know," Jack interrupted. "But we have to take the risk." With trembling hands, Jack pressed a series of buttons, his fingers moving with urgency. Then, with a deep breath, he hit the final switch. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the ship's hum grew quieter, the lights flickering as a loud screeching sound filled the room. Jack's heart raced. Had they done it? Were they too late? Suddenly, the ship shuddered, and with a massive jolt, the lights went out. The ship began to lose altitude, its engines sputtering as it started to fall from the sky. Jack and Sarah exchanged a look of disbelief and relief. They had done it. The executioners were no longer in control. As the ship crashed to the ground, the sound of its destruction echoed through the town, sending a wave of shock and awe through the people of Earth. The battle was over. Earth had won. Jack stood there, breathing heavily, as the dust from the wreckage settled around them. His heart was still pounding, but now, it was a beat of victory. They had not only survived, they had sent a message to the stars. Earth would never be easy prey again.